What if you suddenly lost everything and had no one by your side? Imagine waking up one day to find the world around you unraveling faster than you can grasp, like a tightly wound thread pulled loose at both ends. That's exactly where Sarah Mitchell found herself on a chilly autumn morning in downtown Columbus, Ohio. A tech journalist by trade and truth seeker by heart, Sarah wasn't prepared for the message that changed everything. Elon Musk had just issued a chilling warning to the world, something he called the theory of stupidity, a terrifying idea about how society was sliding into collective ignorance at a pace no one wanted to admit. The news had gone viral, spreading like wildfire across social media, dominating every news feed and discussion board. Sarah sat in her small apartment, coffee growing cold beside her laptop, eyes glued to the live stream where Musk's words echoed ominously, "We're losing the battle against misinformation and complacency. If we don't wake up, the consequences will be catastrophic." Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Sarah whispered to herself, trying to anchor her thoughts amidst the storm raging inside her mind. She felt an uncanny connection to Musk's warning. It wasn't just some distant, abstract theory, it was a mirror held up to her own life and the world she thought she understood. For years, she had chased stories about technology's promise and peril, celebrated its breakthroughs, and mourned its pitfalls. But this felt different. This felt urgent. Her phone buzzed with messages, friends and strangers alike asking for her take, desperate for clarity. Yet, inside, Sarah battled doubt. How could she explain a phenomenon so vast, so complicated, in words that could cut through the noise? Her own past weighed heavy. Sarah grew up in a quiet town in Ohio, raised by her grandmother after losing her parents in a car accident when she was just 10. Her childhood was a mix of warmth and hardship, a loving guardian who struggled to make ends meet, a younger brother named Jake whose brilliant mind was shadowed by his battles with addiction. These memories shaped her. The loss, the struggle, the determination to rise above it all. She remembered nights spent huddled in the warm kitchen, listening to her grandmother's steady voice reminding her that knowledge and kindness were the only weapons worth wielding in a confusing world. Sarah's love for technology had always been her escape and her armor. From a young age, she marveled at the way code and machines could connect people, solve problems, and push humanity forward. But somewhere along the way, the very tools she adored began to show their darker side. Echo chambers that amplified lies, algorithms designed to capture attention rather than truth, and a society that seemed to forget how to listen to one another. The warning from Musk was a call to arms. Sarah felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on her chest. If she failed to bring this story to light, who would? Her editor at the magazine was skeptical, more interested in clicks and sensational headlines than nuanced reporting. The newsroom buzzed with whispers of her doomsday story being a distraction from more profitable topics. Yet Sarah's conviction only grew stronger. She needed to dig deeper, to understand this theory not just as a headline but as a lived reality affecting millions. Outside her window, the city moved on obliviously, unaware that beneath the surface, something fragile was cracking. Sarah's phone buzzed again, a text from Jake, short and cryptic, "Need help." Her heart clenched. Family always came first, but how could she juggle saving her brother while trying to save a society at large? She stared back at Musk's warning one more time, the words reverberating like a pulse through her veins. "We are on the brink of a new kind of stupidity, one born not of ignorance, but of overconfidence and disengagement." What did that mean for the people she loved? For the future she hoped to build? Her fingers trembled as she typed a reply to Jake, promising she was coming home. The story had just begun, but Sarah knew this was more than a headline, it was a turning point. The world had been warned. The question now was, would anyone listen? Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Sarah Mitchell's life had never been easy, but it was the hardships that shaped her into the woman she was today, resilient, fiercely intelligent, and deeply compassionate. Orphaned at 10, she grew up in a small town in Ohio, raised by her grandmother Evelyn, a woman of quiet strength who worked 2 jobs just to keep a roof over their heads. Sarah's earliest memories were a mix of warmth and struggle, the smell of fresh-baked bread mingling with the sound of her grandmother's tired but steady voice as she urged Sarah to never give up. Her younger brother Jake was the light of her life but also her greatest worry. Once a bright and curious child, Jake's battles with addiction had fractured their family over the years, leaving scars both visible and hidden. Sarah often found herself caught between being a sister, a surrogate parent, and a guardian of secrets no one else could understand. Her love for technology was born from a need to escape and to understand the chaotic world around her. As a teenager, Sarah spent countless hours in the local library, devouring books about computers and programming, fascinated by the way the digital world promised order in the midst of human unpredictability. It was this passion that propelled her into journalism, where she specialized in tech and science. Sarah's career was a journey of contradictions. She was ambitious but wary of the sensationalism that often dominated the media. She sought truth but struggled against deadlines and editorial pressures that valued clicks over context. Her editor, Mark, was a pragmatic man who believed stories needed to grab attention or risk being ignored. He often challenged Sarah to make her work more accessible, a euphemism for flashy and simple, which clashed with her commitment to depth and nuance. Despite these challenges, Sarah built meaningful relationships at work and in her personal life. Her best friend, Mia, was her sounding board and confidant, always reminding Sarah to take care of herself even when the world felt like it was crumbling. Sarah's complicated feelings for her estranged father, whom she rarely mentioned, added another layer to her story: resentment, longing, and unanswered questions that lingered in the background of her mind. Family was the bedrock of Sarah's existence. Even with the fractures and pain, she believed in the power of love and loyalty to heal wounds. Her relationship with Jake was the most profound expression of that belief. Despite his struggles, she never gave up on him, holding on to hope that he could find his way back. This hope drove much of her determination in the face of the growing societal crisis triggered by Elon Musk's warning. Sarah's personal history was not just a backdrop but the lens through which she viewed the unfolding chaos. Her past losses made her acutely aware of the fragility of human connection, and her professional experience gave her the tools to navigate the complex intersection of technology, misinformation, and human behavior. As the story of the theory of stupidity began to unravel, Sarah's internal conflicts mirrored the external turmoil. She was a woman at a crossroads, fighting to protect both her family and the truth in a world that seemed determined to bury it. The emotional weight of her backstory gave the unfolding narrative its heart, making her struggles and triumphs deeply relatable. Sarah's story was not just about a societal crisis but about a woman learning to confront her fears, embrace her vulnerabilities, and find strength in the connections that mattered most. It was this foundation of love, loss, and resilience that set the stage for the battles ahead, a journey that would test everything she believed in and force her to grow in ways she never imagined. Sarah's investigation into Elon Musk's chilling warning began quietly but soon spiraled into a maelstrom of conflict and tension that threatened to consume her life. The theory of stupidity, as Musk called it, was more than a headline. It was a dangerous idea that society's collective intelligence was not only stagnating but regressing, driven by overdependence on technology and rampant misinformation. Sarah found herself at the center of a growing storm, trying to piece together facts amid a flood of conspiracy theories, partisan divides, and public confusion. At work, the pressure mounted. Her editor, Mark, insisted she angle the story toward sensationalism, turning Musk's complex warning into clickbait. Sarah resisted, determined to present the nuances, but the newsroom politics were brutal. Some colleagues saw her as naive, others as a threat. Worse yet, an anonymous leak twisted her research, framing her as alarmist and out of touch. Outside the office, the strain seeped into her family life. Jake's addiction worsened under the stress of societal unrest, fueled by misinformation spreading like wildfire in their community. Sarah found herself torn between chasing the truth and supporting her brother, whose cries for help echoed in her mind day and night. Misunderstandings festered. Sarah's long hours and emotional distance caused rifts with Mia, her best friend, who feared Sarah was losing herself in the chaos. The tension peaked during a heated argument where Sarah accused Mia of not understanding the stakes, only to realize that her own fears were driving them apart. Amid this turmoil, moments of hope glimmered. Sarah connected with Dr. Helen Carter, a cognitive scientist researching how misinformation rewires the brain. Their partnership breathed new life into Sarah's mission, offering scientific grounding and a glimpse of possible solutions. Yet, just as Sarah found a foothold, new challenges emerged. A misinformation-driven riot erupted in her hometown, fueled by fear and manipulation. Sarah watched helplessly as familiar streets turned hostile, her community fracturing before her eyes. The emotional toll was immense. This cycle of climax, hope, and renewed crisis became the rhythm of Sarah's days. Each setback tested her resolve, but each small victory, whether a recovered fact, a calmed protest, or a reconciled friendship, rekindled her spirit. The story was no longer just about Elon Musk's warning, it was about real people caught in the crossfire of a battle for truth and sanity. Sarah realized that the theory of stupidity was not an abstract academic concept but a lived experience, a fight for the very soul of society. Through conflict and connection, despair and hope, she began to transform from a passive observer into an active agent of change. The rising conflict was relentless, but so was Sarah's determination to see it through. Sarah's world shifted dramatically the moment she stepped outside her newsroom for what would become the most challenging journey of her life. The theory of stupidity, which she had only begun to understand through interviews and scattered reports, was no longer a distant intellectual debate, it had become a living, breathing crisis that clawed at the very fabric of her community. The streets of Columbus felt different. The usual hum of daily life was punctuated by heated arguments, wary glances, and a pervasive tension that made the air feel heavy and charged. Sarah knew she couldn't rely on second-hand information anymore, she needed to see the situation with her own eyes. Her first stop was the local library, a place she had once loved as a child but now found eerily deserted. Here, misinformation had taken root like a weed in fertile soil, choking out reason and breeding mistrust. Sarah walked between the shelves, her footsteps echoing in the silence, imagining the conversations and fears swirling just beyond these walls. She remembered how technology, once a beacon of hope for connection and knowledge, was now weaponized to manipulate minds and fracture communities. The scene shifted as she moved through neighborhoods where friends and neighbors had turned on one another over false news and viral rumors. A vivid memory burned in her mind, a woman shouting at a group of teenagers, accusing them of spreading lies that threatened to destroy the town's fragile peace. Sarah approached cautiously, offering a listening ear rather than judgment, hoping to build bridges in a landscape littered with broken trust. This was no easy task. Each conversation was a delicate dance, as people clung desperately to beliefs that comforted them, even if those beliefs were built on falsehoods. Yet Sarah found sparks of hope. Small acts of kindness, moments of genuine connection that hinted at the possibility of healing. Her emotional landscape mirrored the physical one, moments of despair punctuated by flashes of optimism. The climax-hope-climax pattern that defined the larger conflict played out in every interaction. At one point, Sarah was swept into a community meeting where tempers flared and accusations flew, a near riot threatening to erupt. But then, a local teacher stood up, reminding everyone of their shared humanity and the importance of truth. That moment of calm was brief but powerful, showing Sarah that change was possible if people chose to listen rather than lash out. From these streets, Sarah's journey led her to a new alliance with Dr. Helen Carter, whose research into cognitive bias and misinformation offered scientific grounding to the chaos. Their partnership was a turning point. Together, they devised educational programs aimed at critical thinking and media literacy, small but vital weapons against the tide of stupidity Musk had warned about. Vivid descriptions brought these scenes to life, the cramped community centers where Sarah and Helen spoke to skeptical audiences, the late nights spent drafting articles and planning strategies, the exhaustion etched into their faces but tempered by fierce determination. Yet the journey was not without unexpected turns. Sarah's own family life continued to unravel. Jake's addiction spiraled, worsened by the stress and confusion surrounding them. In a particularly raw and emotional moment, Sarah found him on the edge, fighting demons both internal and external. Their confrontation was brutal and heartbreaking, yet it forced Sarah to confront her deepest fears about loss and failure. This personal crisis underscored the stakes of the larger battle she faced. The external conflicts of misinformation and societal decline were mirrored in the intimate struggles within her family. Sarah's vivid descriptions of settings, Jake's cluttered apartment, heavy with despair and lost dreams. The hospital waiting rooms thick with anxious hope, drew the reader into the emotional intensity of these moments. These scenes added depth and texture to the narrative, reminding us that behind every grand theory and headline are real people living real lives. The climax of this chapter came as Sarah faced a new, even greater challenge, a major misinformation campaign designed to discredit her and her allies. Suddenly, their work was painted as dangerous, their motives questioned by those who thrived on division. Sarah's resolve was tested to its limits as she endured public smears and threats. But it was also a moment of clarity and growth. Through these trials, she discovered the strength of her community and the power of collective action. Her transformation from isolated journalist to passionate advocate was now undeniable. The chapter closed on a note of tense optimism. Sarah stood at the edge of a new battlefield, armed with knowledge, alliances, and a burning determination to fight not just for her brother or her career, but for the future of a society teetering on the brink. The vivid scenes, raw emotions, and unexpected twists wove together to create a gripping and immersive experience, drawing readers deeper into Sarah's world and setting the stage for the dramatic events yet to come. Sarah's journey plunged deeper into the tangled web of misinformation and societal decay as she took a stand not just as a journalist, but as an activist committed to turning the tide. Leaving behind the relative safety of the newsroom, she immersed herself in grassroots efforts, organizing community forums, speaking at schools, and connecting with everyday people desperate for clarity amid the chaos. Each step forward was fraught with danger, both physical and emotional, but Sarah's resolve only hardened. The streets where she once witnessed division now became arenas of hope and resilience, as neighbors began to find common ground despite the toxic narratives surrounding them. Her partnership with Dr. Helen Carter grew stronger, blending science and storytelling to craft messages that could cut through the noise. Together, they developed workshops focused on media literacy and critical thinking, teaching participants how to spot falsehoods and resist manipulative content. These sessions, held in cramped community centers and bustling libraries, were battlegrounds where misinformation met its fiercest resistance. Sarah vividly recalled one such event in a packed church basement, where skeptical attendees gradually transformed from cynics to engaged learners. The atmosphere buzzed with tension and tentative hope, every question and answer a step toward reclaiming lost ground. Yet, the fight was far from easy. Behind the scenes, a hidden network of profiteers and power players orchestrated misinformation campaigns designed to sow discord and confusion. Sarah's investigations uncovered shadowy figures who manipulated social media algorithms and exploited fears for political and financial gain. The more she uncovered, the clearer it became that this was not just a societal hiccup but a coordinated assault on truth itself. This revelation thrust Sarah into dangerous territory. Threats and warnings followed her, attempts to silence her voice through intimidation and smear tactics. One harrowing night, as she returned home, Sarah noticed unfamiliar cars trailing her route, her heart pounding as she quickened her pace. The stakes were no longer abstract, they were personal. Despite the risks, Sarah's circle of allies grew. Unexpected friends emerged, former skeptics, whistleblowers, and ordinary citizens who decided enough was enough. Their diverse backgrounds and perspectives enriched the movement, fueling it with energy and fresh ideas. Sarah felt buoyed by this newfound community, a sharp contrast to the isolation she had experienced earlier. But even as hope blossomed, Sarah's private life remained fraught. Jake's condition deteriorated, his struggles a constant, painful reminder of the human cost of the crisis. Sarah grappled with guilt and helplessness, torn between her public crusade and her private battles. Their relationship, once a source of strength, became strained under the weight of addiction and misunderstandings. In one unforgettable confrontation, Jake accused Sarah of abandoning him for her work, while Sarah pleaded for him to fight for himself and their family. The rawness of their emotions underscored the complex interplay between personal and societal challenges. Sarah's vivid descriptions of these moments, Jake's haunted eyes, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife, drew readers into the heart of their turmoil, making it impossible to turn away. Meanwhile, the public backlash intensified. Governments and corporations, threatened by Sarah's revelations and the growing movement, pushed back with heavy-handed tactics. Lawsuits, censorship, and propaganda campaigns aimed to discredit and dismantle the progress made. Sarah found herself at the epicenter of a cultural and political storm, navigating legal battles while trying to maintain her integrity and sanity. The media landscape became a minefield, with allies turning into enemies and trusted platforms spreading doubt. Each challenge forced Sarah to adapt, sharpen her focus, and rely on the unshakable support of her closest friends and newfound allies. This chapter's emotional climax came as Sarah faced a breaking point. Exhausted, overwhelmed, and bruised by betrayal and loss, she questioned whether the fight was worth the toll. Yet, even in the darkest moments, a flicker of hope remained, a reminder of why she started this journey in the first place. Drawing strength from her grandmother's words and her own unyielding spirit, Sarah recommitted herself to the cause. The chapter closed with a poignant scene of Sarah standing alone on a rooftop overlooking the city skyline, the weight of responsibility heavy but her resolve unbroken. The vivid imagery of the night, the glowing lights below, and the quiet determination in her eyes encapsulated the complex emotions of despair and hope. This pivotal moment marked Sarah's transformation from a woman battered by circumstance to a leader ready to confront the forces threatening to plunge society into darkness. The story's tension and hope intertwined, creating a compelling narrative that kept readers invested in Sarah's evolution and the unfolding battle for truth. The turning point came suddenly, as if the universe had been holding its breath, waiting for Sarah to rise to a challenge far greater than anything she had faced before. The misinformation campaigns that had once simmered beneath the surface erupted into full-blown chaos, igniting protests and violence in cities across the country. Columbus, her hometown, was no exception. What had started as a community effort to combat falsehoods became a battleground, with angry mobs clashing over rumors and fears fanned by unchecked social media algorithms. Sarah found herself on the front lines, reporting from scenes that resembled war zones more than peaceful neighborhoods. Smoke curled into the sky from burning cars, sirens blared in the distance, and the air was thick with tear gas and tension. Every face she saw carried fear, anger, or despair, emotions she knew too well from her own life struggles. In the midst of the turmoil, Sarah's personal life fractured further. Jake's addiction worsened, exacerbated by the instability all around them. One night, she found him unconscious in their apartment, a moment of sheer terror that crystallized her resolve. This was no longer just a story to tell, it was a fight for survival, for her family, her community, and the truth itself. The vivid scenes of emergency responders, desperate neighbors, and her own frantic efforts to save Jake painted a picture of raw humanity caught in the crossfire. But amid the destruction, Sarah witnessed extraordinary acts of courage and compassion. Strangers risked their safety to protect the vulnerable, volunteers formed human chains to de-escalate violence, and community leaders stepped forward to unite rather than divide. These moments of hope shone like beacons in the darkness, reminding Sarah that even in the worst times, humanity's best qualities could still prevail. Sarah's collaboration with Dr. Helen Carter evolved as well. Together, they launched a groundbreaking initiative combining cutting-edge neuroscience with community outreach to help people understand how their brains could be manipulated by misinformation. Their program used vivid storytelling, immersive experiences, and interactive technology to teach critical thinking skills. They traveled from city to city, often facing hostility and skepticism, but slowly winning over hearts and minds. The descriptions of these sessions captured the emotional intensity and drama, the anxiety of first confrontations, the breakthrough moments of understanding, and the triumphs when participants rejected false narratives. However, the forces against them were relentless. Powerful interests continued to push propaganda and sow division, using every tool at their disposal to undermine Sarah's work. Cyber attacks targeted their websites, smear campaigns tried to paint them as radicals, and internal betrayals shook their team to its core. Sarah's emotional resilience was tested like never before. She endured nights without sleep, moments of crushing doubt, and the pain of watching loved ones pulled into the whirlpool of misinformation. Yet, through it all, she grew stronger and more determined. The emotional climax of this chapter was a public confrontation with a prominent conspiracy theorist whose influence had fueled much of the unrest. Sarah faced him in a live televised debate, a high-stakes battle of facts versus fear. The tension was palpable as millions watched, holding their breath as Sarah calmly dismantled falsehoods with evidence and empathy. The moment was a turning point, not a victory, but a beacon of possibility. It demonstrated that reason and compassion could still cut through the noise. The chapter closed with Sarah reflecting on how far she had come, from a solitary journalist overwhelmed by complexity to a leader capable of standing firm against a tide of stupidity. She understood now that this battle was not just about information but about connection, trust, and the willingness to fight for a better future. The vivid imagery of the city slowly calming after the storm, the first rays of dawn breaking through smoke, and Sarah's steady gaze toward the horizon symbolized the fragile but real hope that lay ahead. The story had reached a critical emotional and narrative peak, blending tension with optimism, despair with resilience, setting the stage for the final chapters where resolution and reflection would bring the full meaning of Elon Musk's warning into focus. In the wake of the televised debate, a subtle shift began to take hold in Sarah's world, a fragile but unmistakable glimmer of hope breaking through the lingering fog of confusion and fear. The confrontation had not ended the battle against misinformation, but it had ignited a spark among many who had long felt powerless or lost in the chaos. Sarah found herself receiving messages from strangers across the country, teachers, parents, students, thanking her for standing up for truth and encouraging her to keep fighting. The warmth of these connections was balm to her weary spirit, reminding her that even in the darkest times, individuals could spark change. Yet, the path ahead remained daunting. Sarah's personal challenges continued to weigh heavily on her. Jake's recovery journey was slow and filled with setbacks, each one threatening to undo the progress they had made. Sarah's role as sister, advocate, and caretaker stretched her to her limits, testing her patience and resolve. There were nights she lay awake, haunted by fears of losing him forever, wondering if all her efforts would end in heartbreak. Still, she refused to give up, drawing strength from the love that had always anchored her through life's storms. Meanwhile, Sarah and Dr. Helen Carter expanded their initiative, launching a national campaign focused on education and empowerment. The program combined neuroscience research with practical tools designed to help people recognize and resist misinformation in their daily lives. They worked closely with schools, libraries, and community organizations, tailoring their message to diverse audiences and needs. The vivid scenes of workshops filled with engaged students, lively discussions, and breakthrough moments painted a picture of a society beginning to reclaim its collective intelligence. Alongside this work, Sarah's journalism evolved. She moved beyond reporting events to telling stories that humanized the struggle against stupidity, focusing on individuals and communities fighting for truth. These narratives resonated deeply, breaking down barriers and inspiring empathy. Sarah's writing became a beacon, illuminating the complex interplay between technology, psychology, and culture that underpinned the crisis. However, not everyone welcomed this progress. Powerful interests that thrived on division and confusion launched new waves of opposition. Sarah's team faced renewed attacks, legal threats, cyber harassment, and attempts to discredit their work. These challenges tested their unity and courage, forcing them to innovate and adapt constantly. Sarah's leadership qualities shone brightest during these trials, as she galvanized her allies with unwavering determination and strategic insight. Through all this, Sarah's own growth was profound. She embraced vulnerability as a source of strength, learning to ask for help and lean on those she trusted. Her relationships deepened, especially with Mia, whose friendship proved a lifeline amid the storm. Sarah's evolving bond with Jake was fragile but hopeful, built on honesty and a shared commitment to healing. The story's emotional rhythm, the push and pull between despair and hope, continued to drive the narrative, keeping readers invested in the characters' journeys. The chapter's climactic moment came when Sarah and her team organized a large-scale community event aimed at celebrating critical thinking and fostering dialogue. The gathering was a mosaic of stories, voices, and ideas, reflecting the rich diversity of experiences touched by the theory of stupidity. As Sarah looked out over the crowd, she saw not just faces but futures, people choosing connection over division, knowledge over ignorance. The vivid descriptions of the event, the colorful banners, the animated conversations, the laughter amid earnest debates, brought the scene to life, capturing the resilience and hope pulsing beneath the surface. The chapter closed with Sarah reflecting on the journey that had brought her here, the losses, the battles, the unexpected friendships, and the lessons learned along the way. She understood now that Elon Musk's warning was not a prophecy of doom but a call to action, a challenge to reclaim humanity's potential through awareness, courage, and compassion. The final lines resonated with a powerful message: life is full of surprises, but love and truth will always lead the way. This moment of resolution and reflection offered readers a profound takeaway, tying together the emotional and thematic threads woven throughout the story while leaving space for continued hope and growth. Sarah's transformation was no longer just personal, it had become a movement. The theory of stupidity, once a cryptic warning from Elon Musk, had evolved into a rallying cry for communities nationwide striving to reclaim their intellect and humanity. The grassroots efforts she helped lead were multiplying, each success a beacon against the creeping darkness of misinformation. Her days were packed with travel, meetings, and speaking engagements, each encounter deepening her understanding of the challenges and possibilities ahead. Yet, despite the momentum, Sarah knew the battle was far from over. The network spreading falsehoods remained resilient, adapting quickly to counter every advance. Their tactics grew more sophisticated, embedding lies within truths and weaponizing emotions to fracture trust further. Sarah witnessed firsthand the fragile line between enlightenment and despair, as people oscillated between hope and cynicism in the face of relentless disinformation. Her partnership with Dr. Helen Carter continued to innovate, integrating new research on cognitive resilience and digital literacy. Together, they developed immersive virtual reality experiences that allowed users to walk through the brain's response to misinformation, seeing how biases form and learning strategies to counteract them. These cutting-edge tools captured public attention and helped demystify complex science, making it accessible and actionable. However, the emotional toll on Sarah was immense. Her relationship with Jake remained tenuous, his addiction recovery was a long, winding road marked by relapses and breakthroughs. Sarah's love and patience were tested daily, her heart heavy with the knowledge that some battles were fought not in the public eye but in the quiet corners of family and home. Despite the strain, their moments of connection, fragile but precious, reminded Sarah why the fight for truth mattered so deeply. Her friendship with Mia blossomed into a steadfast support system, grounding Sarah amid chaos. Together, they navigated the emotional roller coaster of advocacy and personal upheaval, their bond a testament to the power of empathy and resilience. The narrative's tension and hope interwove seamlessly, creating a vivid tapestry of struggle and triumph that kept readers engaged and inspired. As Sarah's influence grew, so did the opposition. Media conglomerates and political actors who profited from division escalated their attacks, launching coordinated campaigns to discredit her work and sow doubt about her motives. The team faced legal battles, hacking attempts, and relentless public smears. Sarah learned to navigate this hostile landscape with strategic acumen and unyielding resolve, drawing strength from her allies and the communities they served. One pivotal moment came when Sarah was invited to testify before a congressional committee investigating misinformation's impact on democracy. The hearing was a crucible of pressure and opportunity, a stage where Sarah's expertise and passion confronted entrenched interests and skepticism. Her testimony, grounded in research and real-world experience, resonated widely, sparking policy discussions and increased public awareness. The vivid descriptions of the hearing, the tense questions, the thoughtful responses, the charged atmosphere, immersed readers in a defining episode of the ongoing battle. Yet, even as Sarah gained national recognition, she remained deeply connected to her roots. She continued to visit her hometown, where the scars of conflict were still visible but healing had begun. Community gardens replaced burned lots, murals celebrated resilience, and local leaders championed education and unity. Sarah saw firsthand the power of collective action to rebuild and renew, fueling her commitment to the cause. The chapter's emotional climax unfolded during a symbolic event, a town hall meeting where citizens from all walks of life shared their stories and hopes for the future. Sarah listened as voices rose in passion and vulnerability, revealing the shared humanity beneath political and social divides. This moment crystallized the story's core message, that love, truth, and connection were the antidotes to the theory of stupidity. The vivid scene, the circle of chairs, the hopeful faces, the quiet tears and laughter, captured the profound complexity and beauty of this turning point. As the chapter closed, Sarah reflected on the journey from fear and confusion to understanding and empowerment. She recognized that the fight was ongoing, a continuous process of learning, unlearning, and rebuilding trust. Yet, she also knew that the seeds planted would grow, nourished by courage and compassion. The final lines echoed a timeless truth: in a world threatened by darkness, it is the light of love and knowledge that will guide us home. This resolution offered readers both closure and inspiration, inviting them to join the ongoing journey toward a wiser, more connected future. Sarah's resolve deepened as the movement she had helped ignite began to influence not just local communities but national conversations. The theory of stupidity, once dismissed as a vague warning, had become a catalyst for action. Governments, educators, and tech companies started paying attention, initiating collaborations aimed at strengthening society's defenses against misinformation and manipulation. Sarah was invited to speak at conferences and participate in think tanks, sharing insights drawn from her on-the-ground experiences and research partnerships. Each engagement was a step toward a more informed and resilient public. Despite the growing external recognition, Sarah remained grounded in the intimate realities of her life. Jake's recovery, while steady, continued to demand her empathy and patience. Their relationship, though battered by past wounds, showed signs of renewal. They began attending counseling together, facing their challenges openly and honestly. These moments of vulnerability and connection revealed a deeper theme, that healing, whether personal or societal, required courage, forgiveness, and unwavering commitment. Sarah's friendship with Mia flourished, providing her with a safe space to decompress and reflect. Their late-night conversations were filled with laughter, frustrations, and plans for the future. Mia's unwavering support was a reminder that even amidst chaos, genuine human connection could endure and empower. The narrative wove these relationships seamlessly with the broader struggle, emphasizing how individual bonds were essential threads in the fabric of societal resilience. On the public front, Sarah's efforts helped catalyze meaningful policy discussions. Her testimony before congressional committees inspired lawmakers to consider legislation aimed at regulating social media algorithms, funding media literacy programs, and supporting mental health resources. While progress was incremental and met with resistance, the dialogue itself marked a critical shift from denial to engagement. Sarah's writing evolved into a powerful tool for change, combining investigative rigor with empathetic storytelling. She chronicled not only the systemic challenges but also the stories of ordinary people finding hope and strength. These narratives humanized the abstract dangers of misinformation, making the stakes deeply personal for her readers. Yet, the opposition remained fierce. Campaigns to undermine her credibility intensified, with coordinated online attacks and attempts to frame her as an extremist. Sarah and her team learned to navigate this digital warfare, developing strategies to protect their work and support one another. The emotional strain was palpable, but so was their collective determination. A pivotal moment arrived when Sarah organized a national summit on truth and resilience, bringing together experts, activists, and community leaders. The event showcased innovative approaches to combating misinformation, from AI tools to community storytelling initiatives. The energy was electric, a testament to the growing momentum and collaboration. The vivid descriptions of the summit, the vibrant panels, passionate debates, and moments of genuine connection, immersed readers in a hopeful vision of collective action. Throughout the journey, Sarah's inner growth was profound. She embraced imperfection and uncertainty, recognizing that the quest for truth was ongoing and complex. Her reflections revealed a mature understanding of the interplay between knowledge, emotion, and identity. The story's emotional core remained intact, balancing the harsh realities of conflict with the uplifting power of resilience. The chapter closed with Sarah standing before a crowd at the summit's conclusion, her voice steady as she shared a message that resonated deeply. In facing the darkness of ignorance and fear, we find the light of unity and hope. Our strength lies not in certainty, but in our willingness to listen, learn, and stand together. The final lines offered a poignant conclusion that encapsulated the story's themes. Love, truth, and the enduring human spirit, as a call to action and a source of inspiration for readers. Sarah stood at the podium, the bright lights casting a warm glow on her determined face as she addressed the packed auditorium. The National Summit on Truth and Resilience had drawn a diverse crowd, educators, activists, policymakers, students, and everyday citizens, all united by a shared commitment to confront the challenges Elon Musk's theory of stupidity had so starkly exposed. As she spoke, Sarah's voice carried the weight of her journey, the battles against misinformation, the personal sacrifices, the moments of despair and hope. She spoke not just as a journalist or activist, but as a woman who had witnessed firsthand the destructive power of ignorance and the transformative strength of love and truth. The audience listened intently, their faces reflecting a mix of resolve and inspiration. Sarah's message was clear: the fight against stupidity wasn't a battle for a select few. It was a collective responsibility requiring courage, empathy, and relentless effort. Outside the auditorium, the atmosphere buzzed with energy and optimism. Workshops buzzed with lively discussions, innovative exhibits demonstrated cutting-edge tools for media literacy, and impromptu conversations sparked new alliances. The summit felt like a turning point, a tangible embodiment of the hope that had carried Sarah through her darkest days. Yet, the journey was far from over. Even as Sarah and her allies celebrated their progress, the forces opposing them continued to adapt and strike back. Disinformation campaigns grew more sophisticated, infiltrating new platforms and targeting vulnerable populations with precision. Sarah knew that vigilance and innovation were essential to stay ahead in this ongoing struggle. Back home, Sarah's life reflected the broader themes of resilience and healing. Jake's journey toward recovery was marked by small victories and setbacks, each testing their bond. But with professional support and Sarah's unwavering love, Jake began to reclaim his life. Their relationship, once strained and fragile, grew stronger through honesty and shared commitment. Mia's friendship remained a pillar of strength, their shared experiences forging an unbreakable bond that grounded Sarah amid the storm. The personal and the political intertwined seamlessly in Sarah's story, underscoring the complexity of combating ignorance and fostering truth. The narrative's emotional depth was palpable, raw moments of vulnerability juxtaposed with soaring hope, the intricate dance between despair and determination. The summit's climax was a powerful panel discussion featuring voices from diverse backgrounds, scientists, educators, survivors of misinformation's harm, and youth activists. Their testimonies painted a vivid picture of the stakes involved and the collective power to enact change. Sarah felt a profound sense of connection, witnessing how shared stories and knowledge could bridge divides and inspire action. As the summit drew to a close, Sarah reflected on the journey that had brought her here. From a curious journalist asking what if to a leader shaping the future, her evolution was both personal and symbolic. Elon Musk's warning about the terrifying theory of stupidity had become a catalyst for transformation, a reminder that while ignorance could spread like wildfire, so too could wisdom, compassion, and courage. The story's resolution was not a neat conclusion but a hopeful invitation, a call to readers to recognize their role in this ongoing battle. Sarah's final words echoed long after the summit ended: "We stand at a crossroads. The path we choose will define our future. Together, through love, truth, and unyielding courage, we can illuminate the darkness and build a world where knowledge and kindness prevail." The vivid imagery of the closing scene, the rising sun over a city beginning to heal, faces illuminated by new understanding, hands joined across divides, left readers with a profound sense of possibility. This chapter encapsulated the full arc of Sarah's journey and the story's themes, blending strong emotion, tension, hope, and character development into a powerful narrative conclusion. It was a story familiar to Americans, yet timeless and universal, reminding us all that despite the challenges, the human spirit's capacity to learn, grow, and love remains our greatest strength. The weeks following the summit marked a period of intense activity and reflection for Sarah. The momentum generated at the event rippled through communities and institutions, sparking new initiatives and dialogues around the country. Sarah found herself at the heart of a growing network dedicated to combating the theory of stupidity, working tirelessly to translate awareness into action. Despite the victories, the stakes remained high. The disinformation landscape continued to evolve, with adversaries employing increasingly subtle and insidious tactics. Sarah and her team had to constantly adapt, integrating new technologies and strategies to safeguard truth and foster critical thinking. Their work became a dynamic balancing act, responding swiftly to threats while building long-term resilience. On a personal level, Sarah's life reflected the ongoing complexities of this struggle. Jake's recovery advanced slowly but surely. There were days filled with hope and laughter, and others shadowed by setbacks and frustration. Their relationship deepened through these trials, built on mutual vulnerability and determination. Sarah learned to celebrate small victories, understanding that healing was a journey rather than a destination. Mia remained her steadfast companion, providing emotional support and candid counsel. Their friendship had become a sanctuary, a space where Sarah could process her fears and aspirations without judgment. The narrative's emotional landscape continued to intertwine the personal and societal, showing how individual experiences echoed broader challenges and triumphs. Sarah's journalism flourished as a platform for education and empowerment. Her articles and multimedia projects reached diverse audiences, blending rigorous investigation with compelling storytelling. She spotlighted voices often overlooked. The teachers innovating in classrooms, the activists mobilizing grassroots efforts, the families navigating misinformation's impact. These stories brought nuance and humanity to complex issues, fostering empathy and understanding. Yet, the opposition persisted. Coordinated smear campaigns intensified, and digital attacks aimed to destabilize the movement. Sarah's team responded with resilience and solidarity, strengthening security measures and public outreach. These trials underscored the relentless nature of the fight and the courage required to sustain it. A significant breakthrough came when Sarah collaborated with policymakers to develop legislation promoting transparency in digital platforms and funding for media literacy programs. Though the path was fraught with political hurdles, the progress signaled a shift toward systemic change. The vivid depictions of legislative debates, advocacy efforts, and community reactions added depth and realism to the story's progression. Sarah also embraced opportunities to mentor the next generation of truth seekers. She spoke at universities and community centers, inspiring young people to critically engage with information and become active participants in shaping their world. Her mentorship highlighted the importance of intergenerational dialogue and the enduring legacy of knowledge. The chapter's emotional climax centered on a powerful community event marking the anniversary of the summit. People from diverse backgrounds gathered to celebrate resilience, share stories, and renew their commitment to the cause. The atmosphere was electric with hope and solidarity. Sarah listened as individuals recounted their journeys, from skepticism to understanding, isolation to connection. The scene's vivid details, the colorful banners, the shared meals, the heartfelt speeches, painted a tapestry of healing and unity. As the event drew to a close, Sarah reflected on the profound lessons of the past months. She understood that the fight against stupidity was not a singular battle but an ongoing process demanding vigilance, empathy, and collective effort. The story's resolution emphasized that while challenges remained, the human capacity for growth and connection offered a powerful antidote. The final lines resonated with a timeless truth: in a world where misinformation threatens to divide us, it is our shared stories and unwavering love that will bind us together and light the path forward. This conclusion invited readers to see themselves as part of the journey, empowered to contribute to a future shaped by truth and compassion. Through strong emotional storytelling, vivid descriptions, and nuanced character development, this chapter reinforced the story's central themes and left a lasting impact, encouraging hope amid adversity and inspiring action in the face of uncertainty. Sarah woke early, sunlight filtering softly through the curtains of her modest apartment. The city outside hummed with its usual bustle, but inside, a quiet determination filled the air. Today marked a new chapter, not only in the fight against misinformation but in her own life. After months of relentless advocacy, personal struggles, and profound growth, Sarah felt a renewed sense of purpose and clarity. Her mornings now began with meditation and journaling, rituals she had adopted to cultivate resilience and focus amid chaos. As she sipped her coffee, her mind wandered to Jake, whose progress in recovery had become the quiet heartbeat of her days. Though the road remained challenging, moments of genuine connection and shared hope punctuated their journey. Sarah's bond with Mia also deepened, their friendship a source of unwavering support and laughter. These relationships anchored her, reminding her that even amidst societal upheaval, human connection was the ultimate source of strength. The movement against the theory of stupidity had grown exponentially. Sarah's initiatives had inspired countless local groups to take up the cause, fostering community education programs, critical thinking workshops, and intergenerational dialogues. She regularly received messages from people across the country sharing their stories of transformation, teachers integrating media literacy into curricula, families reclaiming conversations from polarized narratives, youth leading peer-led fact-checking initiatives. Each message was a testament to the ripple effect of hope and determination. Yet, Sarah remained vigilant. The opposition was relentless, adapting quickly to new strategies and technologies. She and her team worked tirelessly to develop innovative tools to combat emerging threats, from AI-generated deepfakes to algorithmic manipulations. Their efforts were a constant race against evolving challenges, demanding creativity, collaboration, and resilience. Sarah's journalistic work evolved into a platform that balanced investigative rigor with compelling storytelling. She spotlighted the lived experiences of those affected by misinformation, the educators, the activists, the families, and the everyday citizens navigating a complex information landscape. These stories humanized abstract concepts, fostering empathy and understanding while educating readers on practical steps to discern truth. Her writing resonated widely, sparking dialogues that transcended ideological divides. One particularly impactful series focused on how misinformation disproportionately affected marginalized communities, underscoring the intersectionality of the struggle and the need for inclusive solutions. Meanwhile, Sarah's advocacy extended into policy realms. Collaborations with legislators and tech industry leaders led to new initiatives promoting transparency, accountability, and media literacy funding. The legislative battles were arduous, filled with political maneuvering and resistance from entrenched interests. Yet, incremental victories, new bills introduced, corporate commitments made, public awareness raised, signaled a gradual but significant shift. Sarah's role as a bridge between grassroots movements and institutional change was increasingly recognized and valued. Amid these external achievements, Sarah's internal journey continued to unfold. Counseling sessions with Jake brought painful but necessary conversations, healing old wounds and building new foundations of trust and understanding. Their moments together, quiet evenings, shared meals, tentative plans for the future, were infused with a fragile but growing hope. Sarah learned to balance activism with self-care, recognizing that sustaining the fight required nurturing her own well-being. Mia remained a constant source of comfort and clarity. Their late-night talks, spontaneous adventures, and shared reflections created a sanctuary of friendship that fortified Sarah's spirit. Together, they celebrated small victories and weathered setbacks, embodying the resilience that defined the broader movement. Their bond illustrated the profound impact of genuine human connection amid adversity. A highlight of this period was a nationwide campaign launched to coincide with the anniversary of the summit, a multimedia initiative combining educational content, community events, and digital outreach. The campaign aimed to amplify critical thinking skills, promote fact-checking, and encourage civil discourse. Sarah spearheaded content creation, weaving narratives that were both informative and emotionally compelling. The response was overwhelming, with thousands participating in events, sharing stories, and pledging commitment to truth. The campaign's crescendo was a series of community gatherings held simultaneously across the country. Sarah traveled to several, witnessing firsthand the power of collective action and hope. She described scenes of diverse groups coming together, neighbors, strangers, families, engaged in meaningful conversations, sharing meals, and building bridges across divides. The vivid imagery captured the essence of healing and unity, offering a stark contrast to the isolation and mistrust that had once dominated. Throughout these experiences, Sarah's reflections deepened. She recognized that combating stupidity was not merely about countering falsehoods but nurturing the human qualities that foster understanding, curiosity, empathy, humility, and love. She understood that the journey was ongoing, demanding patience and perseverance, but also filled with moments of joy and connection. The story's emotional core was enriched by this mature perspective, blending realism with hope in a way that invited readers to engage deeply and personally. As the chapter drew to a close, Sarah stood before a new audience, a group of young leaders inspired by her work. She shared her story candidly, emphasizing that each person had the power to make a difference. Her words were a call to action and a beacon of hope. We are the stewards of truth and kindness in a world that desperately needs both. Together, we can build a future where wisdom guides us, and love lights the way. The final scene, a room filled with eager faces, the glow of shared purpose illuminating the space, left readers with a profound sense of possibility and responsibility. This chapter, rich with strong emotion, vivid description, and nuanced character development, reinforced the story's central themes. It balanced tension and hope, highlighting the ongoing nature of the struggle while celebrating the resilience and growth of those involved. The narrative invited readers to see themselves as active participants in a collective journey toward a more informed, compassionate world, echoing the timeless message that even in the face of daunting challenges, the human spirit's capacity to learn, connect, and love remains our greatest strength. Sarah sat quietly in her small, cluttered home office, the glow of her laptop screen illuminating the determined expression on her face. Months had passed since the nationwide campaign she helped launch, and while tangible progress was evident, the shadow of misinformation and ignorance still loomed large. The fight was far from over. She had learned that combating the theory of stupidity was like trying to stem a flood. Every barrier they built was met with new torrents of falsehoods and manipulation. But Sarah's resolve had only hardened. She knew this was a marathon, not a sprint, and her journey, as well as the nation's, was one of endurance and continual learning. The challenges she faced were multifaceted: online bots spreading propaganda, political interests undermining educational reforms, and a public fatigued by constant conflict and confusion. Yet, in every obstacle, Sarah found an opportunity to innovate and connect. One of the most rewarding developments was the growth of local truth circles, community groups that met regularly to discuss current events, share verified information, and practice critical thinking skills. Sarah had helped design a toolkit for these groups, emphasizing empathy, respectful dialogue, and active listening. She received heartfelt messages from facilitators describing how these circles had transformed neighborhoods once divided by mistrust into spaces of understanding and cooperation. This grassroots empowerment reminded Sarah that change was possible when people came together with open hearts and minds. Meanwhile, Sarah's personal life was evolving. Jake's journey toward sobriety continued to be a complex dance of progress and setbacks. Some days were marked by frustration and pain, others by small but significant victories, shared smiles, honest conversations, moments of vulnerability that deepened their bond. Sarah's patience and love were tested, yet her commitment never wavered. Their relationship became a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of the human spirit. Mia remained her steadfast ally, her friendship a wellspring of comfort and clarity. Their shared experiences, joys and struggles alike, offered Sarah a reminder that she was not alone in this fight, that human connection was a vital balm against the relentless pressures of activism. On the professional front, Sarah expanded her work into educational reform. Collaborating with schools and universities, she advocated for curricula that prioritized media literacy, emotional intelligence, and civic responsibility. These efforts were met with both enthusiasm and resistance, revealing deep systemic challenges but also promising pockets of hope. Sarah engaged with educators passionate about preparing students to navigate a complex information ecosystem, equipping them with tools to discern truth from falsehood and to engage constructively across differences. Her writing continued to amplify these themes, combining investigative rigor with powerful storytelling that humanized abstract issues. She featured profiles of educators, activists, students, and families, weaving a tapestry of lived experiences that underscored the urgency and possibility of change. Yet, the fight remained arduous. Coordinated disinformation efforts adapted swiftly, exploiting emerging technologies and social vulnerabilities. Sarah and her team developed new strategies, fact-checking AI, community alert systems, and public awareness campaigns, constantly innovating to stay ahead. The emotional toll of these battles was significant, but the support from allies and communities fueled Sarah's perseverance. A significant breakthrough came when Sarah helped broker a coalition between tech companies, policymakers, and civil society groups aimed at transparency and accountability in digital information flows. This coalition worked to develop guidelines for algorithmic fairness, content moderation, and user empowerment. Though fraught with political and commercial tensions, this initiative represented a critical step toward systemic solutions. Sarah's role as a mediator and advocate was pivotal, showcasing her growth from a lone crusader to a collaborative leader navigating complex power dynamics. The narrative's vivid scenes, from tense negotiation rooms to hopeful public forums, immersed readers in the real-world complexity of change-making. A particularly poignant moment unfolded during a televised town hall meeting where Sarah faced tough questions from citizens skeptical of the movement. Her candid responses, acknowledging mistakes, explaining strategies, and expressing humility, won over many hearts, reinforcing the importance of honesty and transparency. This scene captured the emotional highs and lows of public advocacy, humanizing Sarah and deepening reader empathy. As the story progressed, Sarah's reflections became more philosophical and nuanced. She recognized that combating stupidity was as much about fostering a culture of curiosity and kindness as it was about debunking falsehoods. She emphasized the need for collective humility, the willingness to admit uncertainty, listen deeply, and learn continuously. This mature perspective enriched the story's emotional depth, balancing tension with hope and inviting readers to engage thoughtfully. The chapter's climax came during a national conference where Sarah presented new research on cognitive resilience and community empowerment. Her speech was a stirring call to action, urging a shift from fear and division toward curiosity and connection. The vivid descriptions of the packed auditorium, the attentive audience, and the palpable energy created an immersive, inspiring experience. The chapter closed with Sarah walking alone outside the conference center, reflecting on how far the movement had come and how much work lay ahead. The final lines underscored the story's enduring message: the fight for truth is endless, but so is our capacity for growth. In every question asked and every story shared, we find the seeds of a wiser, kinder world. This conclusion invited readers to see themselves as part of this ongoing journey, empowered to contribute to a future shaped by understanding and love. Through strong emotional storytelling, vivid settings, and rich character development, this chapter reinforced the central themes of the narrative and left a lasting impression, reminding readers that even in the face of daunting challenges, hope and human spirit endure. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Sarah sat alone in her office late one evening, the quiet hum of the city outside fading as darkness settled. The past year had been a whirlwind, intense advocacy, personal growth, and battles fought in the shadows of misinformation and human frailty. Tonight, she was reflecting on the journey so far and the road ahead. She opened her laptop, fingers hovering over the keyboard, then began to write a letter, not just to herself, but to everyone who had joined the fight against the theory of stupidity. She wrote about resilience, the power of community, and the importance of embracing uncertainty with humility. Her words flowed with the raw emotion and wisdom forged in the crucible of her experiences. She acknowledged the setbacks and the pain but also celebrated the moments of connection and hope that made the struggle worthwhile. The act of writing felt like a healing ritual, a way to process the complex tapestry of feelings that had defined her journey. As dawn broke, Sarah set her letter aside and prepared for the day's work. Her agenda was packed with meetings, some focused on policy, others on grassroots organizing, and still more on educational initiatives. The diversity of her commitments underscored the multifaceted nature of the challenge. Combating ignorance required systemic change, community engagement, and personal transformation all at once. She moved seamlessly between roles: advocate, mentor, journalist, friend, each demanding empathy, tenacity, and clarity. Sarah's evolving leadership style reflected her growth. She listened deeply, empowered others, and remained adaptable in the face of shifting circumstances. Her work with local truth circles had blossomed into a nationwide network, connecting individuals from varied backgrounds in shared learning and dialogue. Sarah marveled at stories from facilitators who described how these groups had healed old wounds and bridged long-standing divides. The narrative of division was slowly giving way to one of unity and understanding. Yet, the fight against misinformation was far from over. New technologies posed fresh threats, from deepfake videos that blurred reality to sophisticated bots that manipulated public opinion. Sarah and her team responded with cutting-edge tools and community education, constantly innovating to stay one step ahead. The emotional toll of these battles was significant, but moments of genuine connection and progress fueled their perseverance. On the personal front, Sarah and Jake continued to navigate the complexities of recovery and reconciliation. Their relationship was no longer defined by struggle alone but by shared hope and the slow rebuilding of trust. Each milestone, whether a day of sobriety or an honest conversation, was a victory. Sarah's friendship with Mia remained a steadfast anchor, their bond deepened by shared trials and triumphs. Together, they celebrated the movement's achievements and supported each other through challenges, embodying the resilience and compassion that defined their collective journey. Sarah's journalistic work took on new dimensions. She began to explore the psychological and social underpinnings of misinformation, interviewing experts in cognitive science, sociology, and education. These insights enriched her storytelling, providing readers with a nuanced understanding of the forces at play. Her articles highlighted not only the dangers of ignorance but also the pathways to enlightenment, curiosity, critical thinking, and empathy. She emphasized that the fight was not against people but against ignorance itself, a distinction that fostered compassion and unity. A pivotal moment came when Sarah was invited to testify before a congressional committee on digital misinformation. The hearing was intense, with sharp questioning and political maneuvering, but Sarah's clear, honest testimony resonated. She called for comprehensive reforms, greater transparency from tech companies, robust funding for education, and public campaigns promoting media literacy. The hearing marked a turning point, signaling increased political will to address the crisis. Sarah's role as a bridge between grassroots activism and institutional change was solidified, reflecting her growth as a leader capable of navigating complex power dynamics. The narrative's emotional climax unfolded during a community storytelling event organized by Sarah's network. Individuals from diverse backgrounds shared their experiences with misinformation, stories of loss, enlightenment, resilience, and hope. The event was a testament to the power of storytelling to heal and unite. Sarah listened, tears in her eyes, as people expressed gratitude for the movement that had given them voice and agency. The vivid descriptions of the gathering, the laughter, the tears, the shared meals, the music, painted a rich tapestry of human connection and healing. As the chapter drew to a close, Sarah stood on a stage once more, addressing a crowd eager for change. Her speech was a heartfelt call to embrace the ongoing journey with courage and compassion. She acknowledged the challenges ahead but emphasized the collective strength and wisdom that had already emerged. The final lines echoed with hopeful resolve: "In the face of darkness, we choose light. In the face of ignorance, we choose understanding. Together, we build a future where truth and love guide our way." The scene faded to a sunrise over the city, a symbol of new beginnings and endless possibilities. This chapter wove together strong emotion, vivid imagery, and rich character development, reinforcing the story's themes of resilience, hope, and collective action. It invited readers to see themselves as part of an ongoing movement toward a more informed, compassionate world. The narrative's balance of tension and optimism created a compelling, inspiring experience, one that lingers long after the last word is read. Sarah stared out her apartment window as the city lights flickered beneath the dark sky, the noise of distant traffic blending into a quiet hum. The battle against misinformation, the so-called theory of stupidity, had become a defining part of her life, one that demanded everything she had, and then some. Yet tonight, there was a new kind of tension stirring inside her, an awareness that the fight was no longer just external but deeply personal. The victories had been real, truth circles flourishing across neighborhoods, legislative progress inching forward, Jake steadily rebuilding his life, but beneath it all lurked a creeping exhaustion and a question she'd kept pushing aside: how sustainable was this path? Was she, and everyone else involved, at risk of burning out under the relentless pressure? These doubts gnawed at her as she prepared for the next day's schedule, knowing that the stakes had never been higher. Her phone buzzed, Mia's name lighting up the screen. Sarah answered with a tired but warm voice. They talked late into the night, sharing concerns, frustrations, and hopes. Mia reminded her of the importance of self-care and the power of small joys: a walk in the park, a shared meal, moments of silence. Their friendship was more than emotional support, it was a lifeline, a reminder that no one could carry the weight of change alone. The conversation ended with a plan to meet the following day, a small but significant anchor in Sarah's stormy life. The next morning brought a surge of energy as Sarah dove into a meeting with community leaders organizing a new initiative to bring critical thinking workshops to underserved schools. The room was filled with passionate educators, activists, and parents, each driven by the same fierce commitment to protect the next generation from the traps of misinformation. Sarah felt a swell of hope as ideas flowed, challenges were acknowledged openly, and solutions began to take shape. Yet she also sensed the underlying currents of resistance, bureaucratic hurdles, funding gaps, and societal fatigue, that threatened to stall progress. It was clear that the movement needed not just passion but strategy, persistence, and broad-based alliances. Later, Sarah attended a panel discussion featuring experts in psychology, technology, and education, exploring how cognitive biases and social dynamics fueled the spread of falsehoods. The conversation was dense but illuminating, providing new tools and frameworks that Sarah planned to weave into her work. She was struck by the complexity of the problem, how deeply human it was, rooted in fear, identity, and community. This realization deepened her resolve to approach the fight with empathy rather than anger, recognizing that the struggle was against ignorance, not against people themselves. Back at home, Sarah found a quiet moment to write in her journal, pouring out thoughts and feelings that had no place in the public sphere. She wrote about the weight of responsibility, the fragile hope flickering amid setbacks, and the lessons she'd learned about vulnerability and strength. The act of writing was cathartic, a reminder that her story was part of a larger human narrative. A mosaic of struggle, growth, and connection. As evening fell, Sarah received a call from Jake. His voice was steady, filled with cautious optimism. He shared news of a new support group he'd joined, and they talked about plans to attend a community event together. Their conversations were no longer dominated by crisis but by shared dreams and tentative plans for the future. Sarah treasured these moments, knowing they represented the hard-won progress of healing and trust. The chapter's emotional climax came during a large community forum where Sarah was invited to speak alongside other movement leaders. The venue buzzed with anticipation as people from all walks of life gathered to share stories, challenges, and hopes. Sarah's speech was heartfelt and raw, acknowledging the fears and frustrations that many felt, but also celebrating the resilience and courage that had carried them through. She emphasized the importance of kindness and curiosity as weapons against ignorance, urging the audience to see one another not as opponents but as allies on a shared journey. The room was filled with nods, tears, and applause, a collective affirmation of commitment and hope. After the event, Sarah stayed late, mingling with attendees and listening to their stories. One woman shared how a truth circle had helped her reconnect with her estranged brother. A teacher described the transformation in her classroom after adopting critical thinking curricula. A young man spoke of finding purpose in activism despite overwhelming odds. These personal testimonies painted a vivid picture of healing and empowerment, countering the despair that often dominated headlines. As the night wore on, Sarah stepped outside and looked up at the stars, the vastness above offering a moment of perspective. She reflected on the journey, the highs and lows, the victories and losses, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. The fight against the theory of stupidity was far from over, but the community they had built, the lessons learned, and the love shared were powerful foundations for the future. The chapter closed with Sarah's quiet vow to continue the journey with renewed energy and compassion. The final words resonated with a timeless message: in a world shadowed by confusion and division, it is our shared humanity, our courage to listen and learn, that will light the way forward. Through vivid description, strong emotional currents, and nuanced character development, this chapter reinforced the story's core themes: hope amid adversity, the power of connection, and the enduring strength of the human spirit, leaving readers inspired to join the movement toward truth and understanding. Sarah stood at the edge of the community garden, the scent of fresh earth and blooming flowers mixing with the crisp morning air. This garden was more than a patch of green in the city, it was a symbol of growth, resilience, and renewal. Over the past months, she had watched it transform from barren soil into a thriving oasis tended by neighbors united in purpose. The garden mirrored the movement she was part of, fragile at first, nurtured by many hands, growing stronger with every challenge faced together. Today, Sarah was meeting with a group of volunteers who wanted to use the garden as a space for workshops on media literacy and critical thinking, turning a literal seedbed into fertile ground for new ideas. As the volunteers arrived, their faces reflected a mix of hope and determination. Among them was Marcus, a high school teacher who had joined the movement after witnessing firsthand how misinformation had divided his classroom. He spoke passionately about creating safe spaces for young people to question and explore, to build skills that would protect them throughout their lives. Another volunteer, Linda, a retired librarian, offered her expertise in curating trustworthy resources and facilitating respectful discussions. Sarah felt a surge of gratitude for these everyday heroes, whose commitment embodied the movement's true power: community-driven change. Their collaboration was a living proof that knowledge and kindness could cultivate resilience. Later that afternoon, Sarah attended a virtual conference on emerging technologies and their role in spreading or combating misinformation. The presentations were eye-opening, deepfake videos becoming increasingly sophisticated, AI algorithms amplifying sensational content, social media platforms struggling with moderation. Yet amidst the technological concerns, there was a clear message: human agency remained vital. Technology could be harnessed for good or ill, but it was people's choices, values, and actions that would ultimately shape the information landscape. This insight reinforced Sarah's conviction that education and empathy were the strongest defenses against the theory of stupidity. The keynote speaker's words echoed in her mind: in an age of information overload, wisdom is the compass that guides us through the noise. That evening, Sarah met with Mia at a small cafe known for its cozy atmosphere and open mic nights. Over cups of coffee, they discussed recent developments, the successes of the Truth Circles, Jake's steady progress, and Sarah's plans to launch a podcast featuring personal stories of overcoming misinformation. Mia encouraged Sarah to prioritize rest and joy alongside activism, reminding her that sustainable change required balance. Their conversation drifted to lighter topics, their favorite books, music, and memories from college, offering a welcome respite from the intensity of their work. These moments of laughter and ease strengthened their friendship, a vital source of renewal in Sarah's demanding life. The next day brought a critical meeting with a coalition of policymakers, educators, and tech leaders aiming to draft comprehensive legislation on digital transparency. Sarah entered the room aware of the high stakes and conflicting interests. Some participants prioritized privacy, others economic growth, and some genuine concern for truth. Navigating this complex terrain required diplomacy, patience, and steadfast commitment to the movement's core values. Sarah advocated fiercely for provisions ensuring algorithmic accountability, funding for media literacy programs, and protections for whistleblowers exposing disinformation campaigns. The discussions were tense but constructive, reflecting the challenges of translating ideals into policy. By the end, a preliminary agreement was reached, a hopeful step toward systemic change. That night, Sarah received an unexpected message from an old mentor, Professor Ellis, whose early teachings had inspired her activism. They arranged a video call filled with warmth and wisdom. Ellis praised Sarah's progress and reminded her of the importance of perspective. "The struggle you're engaged in is part of a much larger human story," he said. "Remember to celebrate the small victories, to nurture your spirit as you nurture others." Their conversation rekindled Sarah's sense of purpose and grounded her amidst the whirlwind of responsibilities. In the days that followed, Sarah's podcast launched to enthusiastic response. Listeners shared stories of awakening, healing, and hope, creating a ripple effect of connection and empowerment. Sarah curated episodes featuring diverse voices, teachers, students, activists, parents, each revealing unique facets of the fight against ignorance. The podcast became another platform for building community, sparking dialogue, and humanizing complex issues. Sarah felt a profound sense of fulfillment, witnessing the movement evolve into a multifaceted force for change. Amid these professional strides, Sarah's relationship with Jake deepened into a steady partnership marked by mutual support and understanding. They celebrated milestones together, the completion of Jake's counseling program, new job opportunities, moments of honest communication. These victories, though quiet, were powerful reminders of resilience and hope. Sarah's patience and love nurtured their bond, illustrating that personal healing was intertwined with social transformation. The chapter's emotional climax unfolded during a large public event held in the community garden, now transformed into a vibrant gathering space. Families, neighbors, activists, and curious newcomers filled the area, sharing food, stories, and laughter. Sarah took the stage, her voice steady and passionate as she recounted the movement's journey, the obstacles overcome, the lessons learned, and the promise ahead. She emphasized that the fight against the theory of stupidity was not a battle of winners and losers but a collective quest for truth and understanding. The crowd's response was electric, a chorus of applause and cheers echoing the shared commitment. As twilight deepened, Sarah stepped away from the crowd, breathing in the fragrant air and feeling the pulse of community all around her. She reflected on how far she had come, from the lonely nights of doubt to this moment of shared triumph. The garden, the people, the stories, they were living proof that change was possible. The final words of the chapter lingered with quiet power: "In every seed planted, every story told, and every heart opened, we grow a future where knowledge and kindness flourish side by side." Through vivid imagery, emotional depth, and rich character interplay, this chapter reinforced the narrative's themes of hope, resilience, and the transformative power of community, inviting readers to join the ongoing journey toward a wiser, more compassionate world. Sarah woke up feeling the weight of the past few years pressed down on her chest. The fight against the theory of stupidity had consumed her in ways she never expected, testing her limits and reshaping her understanding of the world and herself. Yet as she rose and looked out at the sunrise painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, she found a flicker of peace. Today was different. Today, she would confront not just the external chaos of misinformation but the internal battle she had long avoided, fear. Fear that despite all efforts, the tide of ignorance might be too strong, fear that her closest relationships might fray under the strain, fear that the movement she cherished could falter. But she also recognized that fear was a sign of care, a reminder that what was at stake truly mattered. Her morning routine was purposeful, a blend of mindfulness and preparation. She journaled briefly, writing down her fears alongside affirmations of strength and hope. She reached out to Mia with a simple message, "Let's talk later. I need some grounding." The reply was immediate and warm, a reminder that she was not alone in this journey. The day's agenda was packed with challenges, a strategy session with her core team, a media interview addressing recent controversies, and a community outreach event focused on digital literacy for seniors. Each engagement demanded her full presence and resilience. In the strategy meeting, tensions surfaced as team members debated priorities and approaches. Sarah listened carefully, mediating with empathy and clarity, ensuring that diverse perspectives were honored while steering the group toward common goals. The complexity of balancing urgency with sustainability was palpable, but the shared commitment shone through. The media interview was a high-pressure moment. Reporters questioned Sarah about accusations that the movement was censoring dissent and infringing on free speech. She responded thoughtfully, acknowledging the delicate balance between combating falsehoods and preserving open dialogue. Her words emphasized transparency, education, and respect for diverse opinions, framing the movement's mission as one rooted in empowerment rather than suppression. The interview was widely praised, bolstering public understanding and support. Later, at the community event, Sarah witnessed a different kind of connection. Seniors gathered around tablets and laptops, guided patiently by volunteers teaching them how to spot misinformation online. The joy in their faces as they mastered new skills was palpable, a testament to the movement's inclusive spirit. Sarah shared stories and listened to participants' experiences, deepening her appreciation for the intergenerational nature of this fight. These moments reaffirmed that the struggle against ignorance was not just a political or technological battle but a deeply human one. That evening, Sarah met Mia at the park, their conversation flowing easily as they walked beneath the stars. Mia shared her own fears and hopes, reminding Sarah that vulnerability was a source of strength, not weakness. Together, they made plans for a retreat focused on healing and renewal, recognizing the importance of nurturing activists' well-being to sustain the movement's momentum. Back home, Sarah reflected on the day's events and her evolving role. The journey had transformed her from a solitary seeker of truth into a connector, leader, and healer. She acknowledged the scars, moments of doubt, exhaustion, and loss, but also the profound growth and resilience that had emerged. Her relationship with Jake had become a cornerstone of support and renewal, grounding her amidst the chaos. The network of friends, allies, and communities she had helped build was a living testament to the power of collective action. Sarah prepared for a keynote address at an upcoming conference on misinformation and social change. She crafted her speech with care, weaving together personal stories, research insights, and calls to action. Her message centered on hope and humanity, the idea that despite the complexities and challenges, the fight against the theory of stupidity was ultimately a fight for connection, understanding, and love. She envisioned a future where communities were empowered to think critically, where technology served truth, and where empathy bridged divides. As the chapter closed, Sarah sat quietly by her window, watching the city lights twinkle in the night. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey, its trials and triumphs, its heartbreaks and healing. The final lines resonated with quiet strength: fear will come and go, but so will courage. In every act of kindness, every question asked, and every truth spoken, we forge a path toward a brighter tomorrow. Through intimate emotional portrayal, vivid setting, and rich character development, this chapter underscored the story's core themes: resilience, hope, and the enduring power of human connection, inviting readers to carry forward the torch in their own lives. The morning sunlight spilled through the blinds as Sarah prepared for a day that felt heavier than most. The news cycle had exploded overnight with stories of a new misinformation scandal implicating powerful figures, shaking the very foundation of trust she and her movement had worked so hard to rebuild. The so-called theory of stupidity had manifested again in a way that felt personal, a betrayal that cut deep. Sarah's phone buzzed non-stop with messages from concerned allies, reporters seeking interviews, and strangers desperate for clarity. Yet beneath the chaos, she felt a simmering resolve. This was the moment to stand firm, to lead with unwavering conviction. Her first call was with Jake, whose calm voice offered a rare anchor amid the storm. They spoke candidly about the impact of the revelations on their work and their spirits. Jake reminded Sarah of the importance of truth as a compass, even when the path ahead was uncertain. Their conversation was a balm, a shared breath of hope and determination. Next came a video conference with the Truth Circle leaders, a diverse group united by their mission to empower communities against deception. The discussion was intense, filled with urgent planning and strategy shifts to address the new challenges. Sarah listened as voices rose with frustration and fear, then lowered with encouragement and ideas. Together, they reaffirmed their commitment to transparency, education, and resilience. The solidarity in the room was palpable. A reminder that while the theory of stupidity sought to divide, their collective strength was greater. Later, Sarah sat down for an in-depth interview with a national news outlet. The questions were sharp, probing the movement's tactics, funding, and influence. Sarah answered with honesty and clarity, acknowledging imperfections while highlighting the progress made. She emphasized the movement's grassroots origins and the vital role of everyday citizens in reclaiming truth. The interview sparked widespread discussion, galvanizing support and sparking new debates about the responsibility of media and technology companies. In the afternoon, Sarah attended a workshop on digital literacy tailored for teenagers, facilitated by Marcus and other volunteers. Watching the young participants engage with critical thinking exercises and media analysis, Sarah felt a surge of hope. These teenagers represented the future, their curiosity and resilience a beacon against the tide of misinformation. Sarah joined a lively discussion, sharing stories and strategies, and was struck by the energy and creativity bubbling in the room. As evening fell, Sarah found herself alone in the community garden, the space now rich with growth and life. She walked among the plants, the cool air carrying the scent of soil and leaves. The garden had become a sanctuary, a place to reflect and recharge. Here, the metaphor of growth and patience resonated deeply. Change was not instant, it was a slow, deliberate process nurtured by many hands and hearts. Sarah sat on a bench, closing her eyes and breathing deeply, grounding herself in the moment. Her phone vibrated, a message from Mia inviting her to a quiet dinner at her place. The evening provided a much-needed respite. Over shared food and soft music, they talked about the day's turmoil, their fears, and the small victories that kept them going. Mia's presence was a steady light, reminding Sarah that amidst the chaos, human connection was the foundation of hope. Later that night, Sarah drafted a message to the movement's supporters, a heartfelt note acknowledging the difficult times while reaffirming their shared purpose. She spoke of resilience, community, and the unyielding pursuit of truth. The response was immediate and overwhelming, messages of solidarity, stories of personal breakthroughs, offers of help. The digital flood of support reinforced the lessons Sarah had learned again and again, that even in the darkest moments, the collective spirit could shine. The chapter's emotional climax came unexpectedly when Sarah received a call from a young woman who had recently joined a truth circle. Her voice trembled as she shared how the movement had helped her reconnect with her estranged father, bridging a gap caused by misinformation-fueled divisions. This personal story crystallized the stakes and the power of their work. Sarah felt a wave of emotion, gratitude, sadness, hope, all mingling into a profound reaffirmation of purpose. Sarah stood by her window, watching the city lights flicker like distant stars. The challenges were immense, the journey far from over, but the flame of hope burned bright within her. The final words lingered with quiet strength. In a world shadowed by lies, it is our shared commitment to truth and empathy that will light the way forward. Through vivid imagery, emotional depth, and nuanced character interplay, this chapter reinforced the story's core themes: resilience, hope, and the enduring power of human connection, inviting readers to carry forward the torch in their own lives. The early morning fog hung low over the city as Sarah stepped out onto her balcony, the cool air a sharp contrast to the restless energy buzzing in her mind. The revelations from recent weeks had left many shaken, but today marked a turning point. She was preparing for a national summit, a gathering of activists, educators, technologists, and policymakers, to confront the escalating crisis of misinformation head-on. This summit was more than a conference, it was a beacon of hope, a chance to forge alliances and craft strategies that could shift the tide. Sarah felt the weight of expectation but also the fire of determination that had carried her through every obstacle so far. Her phone chimed with messages from Jake, Mia, and Marcus, each sending encouragement and logistical updates. Their support was the invisible scaffolding holding her steady. Before leaving, she paused to review her keynote speech, one she had poured her heart into. It wove together personal narrative and hard data, the story of a movement rising from frustration and fear to resilience and action. She hoped her words would inspire, challenge, and unite those who would listen. The summit venue buzzed with activity, banners bearing slogans like "Truth Matters" and "Together Against Deception" fluttered in the breeze. Sarah greeted colleagues and new faces alike, feeling the electric pulse of collective purpose. The opening session was powerful, with speakers sharing stories of grassroots victories, technological innovations, and policy breakthroughs. The atmosphere was charged with optimism tempered by the gravity of the mission. Sarah's keynote was met with attentive silence that shifted into heartfelt applause. She spoke candidly about the theory of stupidity, the human vulnerabilities that misinformation exploited, and the essential role of empathy and education in the response. Her call to action emphasized collaboration across sectors and communities, stressing that no one group could solve this alone. After the speech, she fielded questions that ranged from practical to philosophical, engaging with sincerity and clarity. Throughout the day, Sarah participated in workshops on emerging technologies, community engagement strategies, and legislative advocacy. She contributed insights from her own experience, learning from others in turn. The conversations were complex, sometimes contentious, but always rooted in a shared commitment to progress. Networking sessions sparked promising partnerships, and informal discussions over meals deepened connections. That evening, a reception brought a more personal dimension to the summit. Sarah found herself in conversations with young activists whose passion reminded her of her own beginnings, educators innovating in challenging environments, and tech experts wrestling with ethical dilemmas. Each encounter reinforced the multifaceted nature of the fight and the necessity of diverse voices. Amid the whirlwind, Sarah received a message from Jake, news of a community project launching in a neighboring city inspired by their truth circles. The message was a beacon of hope, evidence that the movement's ripple effect was growing. She smiled, feeling the tangible impact of their collective efforts. Back in her hotel room, exhaustion settled in, but so did reflection. Sarah revisited her notes, contemplating the summit's successes and the challenges ahead. She wrote an entry in her journal, capturing the mixture of hope and responsibility swirling within her. The act of writing was a grounding ritual, reminding her that amidst grand plans and public battles, personal clarity was vital. The chapter's emotional climax arrived during a late-night call with Mia, their voices low but filled with shared resolve. They spoke of the toll the movement exacted, on mental health, relationships, and personal dreams, but also of the deep fulfillment it brought. Mia's encouragement was a lifeline, a reminder that healing and activism were intertwined. They planned a retreat for movement leaders, a space to renew and reconnect, acknowledging that sustaining change required caring for the changemakers themselves. Sarah looked out over the city skyline, the lights twinkling like distant promises. The journey was far from over, the path ahead remained fraught with uncertainty and struggle. Yet in that moment, she felt a profound sense of purpose and belonging. The final lines echoed in her mind: "Together, we rise, not just to fight ignorance, but to build a future where truth, empathy, and courage light every step." Through vivid setting, intimate emotional portrayal, and dynamic character interplay, this chapter underscored the enduring themes of resilience, hope, and collective strength, inviting readers to stand with Sarah and the movement in shaping a wiser world. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a warm amber glow over the city as Sarah walked through the bustling streets on her way to the final event of the summit, a community gathering aimed at bridging divides and fostering dialogue among neighbors from all walks of life. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of speeches, meetings, and late nights, but tonight promised a different kind of energy, a chance to witness the movement's impact on real people, face to face, heart to heart. Sarah carried with her a mixture of exhaustion and exhilaration, knowing that moments like this were the true measure of progress. The venue was a local community center, its walls decorated with colorful murals depicting unity and resilience. Tables lined the room, each representing a different neighborhood group, activist organization, or educational initiative. People of all ages mingled, sharing food, stories, and laughter. The air buzzed with a hopeful hum, a stark contrast to the division and suspicion Sarah had battled for so long. She felt a swell of pride and gratitude as she moved through the crowd, greeting familiar faces and meeting new allies. As the evening unfolded, Sarah took the stage to share a few words. Her voice carried the weight of experience and the lightness of hope. She spoke of the theory of stupidity not as a condemnation but as a challenge, a call to awareness, action, and compassion. She reminded everyone that misinformation was not just an abstract threat but a force that affected families, friendships, and communities. Her message was clear: the antidote was not only facts but empathy and connection. After her speech, Sarah joined a small group gathered around a table, where Marcus was facilitating a discussion with teenagers who had participated in the movement's educational programs. Their insights were sharp, their questions probing and hopeful. Listening to their voices, Sarah felt a surge of optimism. These young people were not just the future, they were active agents of change now, embodying the movement's promise. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Sarah found a quiet corner with Mia and Jake. They reflected on the journey, the setbacks and breakthroughs, the personal growth and collective victories. Jake shared news of his progress in counseling and new job opportunities, milestones that felt deeply connected to the movement's broader impact. Mia spoke of plans for the upcoming retreat, emphasizing the need for rest and renewal. Their camaraderie was a testament to the strength found in community. The night deepened, and Sarah lingered outside the center, breathing in the cool air and watching the stars emerge. She thought about the winding path that had brought her here, the losses endured, the fears faced, the hopes kindled. The garden, the truth circles, the podcast, the summit, they were all threads woven into a tapestry of resilience and love. The fight against ignorance was ongoing, but so was the growth of understanding and solidarity. As she turned to leave, Sarah's phone buzzed with a message from a stranger who had attended the event. It was a simple note of thanks and a story of reconnection with a family member after years of estrangement fueled by misinformation. The message was a reminder of the movement's ripple effect, the small, profound changes that built a better world one relationship at a time. The chapter's emotional climax arrived in this quiet exchange, underscoring the narrative's core truth, that beyond policies and technologies, the heart of the fight was human connection. Sarah felt a deep, abiding hope, a belief that despite the darkness, the light of empathy and truth would prevail. Sarah walked home beneath the vast night sky, the city light sparkling like a constellation of possibilities. The final lines lingered with gentle power: in every conversation sparked, every bridge rebuilt, and every truth embraced, we kindle the flame of a wiser, kinder tomorrow. Through rich description, emotional depth, and meaningful character interactions, this chapter celebrated the enduring power of community and the transformative journey from fear to hope, inviting readers to join the ongoing quest for truth and connection. The morning air was crisp and quiet as Sarah stood at the edge of the community garden, the place that had become both a refuge and a symbol of growth for her and the movement. The delicate buds of spring flowers stretched toward the sun, a vivid reminder that change, though slow and sometimes painful, was always possible. Today marked the beginning of the retreat Mia had organized for the core leaders of their movement. A much-needed pause to reflect, recharge, and reconnect after years of relentless struggle against the theory of stupidity. Sarah felt a mixture of relief and anticipation. This was their chance to heal, to regain strength for the challenges still ahead. The retreat center was nestled in the woods outside the city, surrounded by towering trees and the gentle sounds of nature. As Sarah arrived, she was greeted by familiar faces: Jake, Mia, Marcus, and others who had become her closest allies and friends. The atmosphere was warm and welcoming, a stark contrast to the tension and urgency that often defined their daily work. For the first time in a long while, Sarah felt safe enough to let down her guard and simply be present. The days that followed were a blend of workshops, meditation sessions, heartfelt conversations, and moments of quiet solitude. Sarah participated eagerly, sharing her experiences and listening deeply to others. The group explored themes of burnout, resilience, and the emotional toll of fighting misinformation. They practiced mindfulness techniques to manage anxiety and stress, recognizing that personal well-being was integral to sustaining the movement's mission. One afternoon, as sunlight filtered through the leaves, Sarah sat by a small pond, reflecting on her journey. She thought about the moments of doubt and despair that had once seemed insurmountable, the betrayals, the isolation, the relentless barrage of misinformation that threatened to overwhelm. Yet here she was, surrounded by comrades who shared her vision and strength. The retreat had rekindled her sense of purpose, reminding her that the fight was not hers alone. A pivotal moment came during a group sharing circle. Each person spoke vulnerably about their fears and hopes. When it was Sarah's turn, she recounted her early struggles and the turning points that had shaped her path. She acknowledged the pain but also the profound growth that had emerged. Tears welled up as she expressed gratitude for the community that had carried her through. The circle responded with warmth and affirmation, reinforcing the bonds that sustained them. That evening, under a canopy of stars, Sarah and Mia sat by a campfire. Their conversation turned to the future, plans for expanding their work, strategies to engage new audiences, and the importance of nurturing the next generation of leaders. Mia emphasized that the retreat was just the beginning of a renewed commitment to holistic activism, one that honored both the cause and the individuals behind it. Sarah felt a deep sense of hope, energized by the possibilities ahead. The chapter's emotional climax unfolded as Sarah received a letter from a mother who had attended one of their workshops. The letter described how the mother's family had been torn apart by misinformation and how, through the movement's resources and support, they were beginning to rebuild trust and communication. This personal testament underscored the movement's impact beyond headlines and statistics, a profound transformation in lives and relationships. As the retreat concluded, Sarah packed her bags with a renewed spirit. She knew the road ahead would still be challenging, but the lessons of this pause, resilience, compassion, and connection, would guide her. Stepping outside, she took a deep breath of the fresh forest air, feeling grounded and ready. Sarah's quiet affirmation, "In tending to our wounds, we find the strength to heal the world. Together, we grow, not just in numbers, but in courage and heart." Through vivid natural imagery, intimate emotional portrayal, and deep character development, this chapter celebrated renewal and the essential balance between personal well-being and collective activism, inviting readers to find their own moments of restoration in the pursuit of change. The morning after the retreat felt different to Sarah, lighter somehow, yet charged with new purpose. Back in the city, the pace of life resumed, but within her, a deep calm had settled, a quiet confidence born from rest and reflection. She met Jake at their favorite coffee shop, the place where many of their conversations about the movement's future had begun. The sunlight streamed through the windows, casting warm patterns on the wooden table as they sipped their drinks. They spoke not just of plans and strategy but of the personal growth that the retreat had sparked. Jake shared how therapy had helped him untangle years of anxiety, and Sarah opened up about her fears of burnout and the new tools she'd learned to cope. Their conversation drifted toward the next big challenge, scaling the movement without losing its core values. The theory of stupidity was evolving, and so too had the tactics of misinformation. They knew the fight required innovation and vigilance. Sarah suggested a new initiative, partnering with schools to integrate media literacy into curricula, empowering young people before misinformation could take root. Jake loved the idea and vowed to help mobilize local educators and activists. Later that week, Sarah attended a city council meeting to advocate for funding this initiative. The room was packed with community members, some skeptical, others supportive. As she presented her case, sharing stories from the movement's work and the data behind their proposals, she could feel the tension in the room ease. A city councilwoman approached her afterward, expressing interest in sponsoring the program. It was a small victory but one that signaled growing institutional recognition. The media's tone had shifted, too. Articles were appearing that highlighted the movement's successes rather than controversies. Sarah participated in a podcast interview where she discussed the personal and collective journey behind their work. She emphasized the importance of empathy and education, warning that the theory of stupidity was not a condemnation of individuals but a challenge to society to rise above fear and division. One afternoon, Marcus invited Sarah to visit a high school where he was piloting a media literacy workshop. Walking through the hallways buzzing with teenagers, Sarah felt energized by their curiosity and critical thinking. During the workshop, students analyzed real news stories, practiced identifying bias, and discussed the emotional pull of sensational headlines. Sarah watched as a young girl raised her hand, saying, "I want to help my family see things differently." It was a moment that crystallized the movement's impact, a seed planted for a wiser future. Back home, Sarah received an unexpected message from a journalist who wanted to write a feature story about her personal journey. The article aimed to humanize the struggle behind the headlines, showing the resilience and heart of those fighting misinformation. Sarah hesitated but agreed, recognizing the power of storytelling to inspire empathy and action. As the weeks passed, the movement's momentum grew. New truth circles formed, and partnerships expanded. Sarah felt the bittersweet mix of joy and fatigue, celebrating progress while aware of the road still ahead. One evening, after a long day, she sat alone on her balcony, reflecting on how far she'd come. The scars of past betrayals still lingered, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they were part of a mosaic of strength and hope. The chapter's emotional climax came when Sarah received a video call from a woman in a small town who had been inspired by their work. The woman shared how misinformation had divided her community but how the movement's tools helped bring neighbors together, restoring dialogue and trust. Tears streamed down Sarah's face as she listened, proof that even in the darkest places, light could break through. Sarah looked out over the city skyline, the lights twinkling like beacons of possibility. She whispered to herself, "Every small act of truth builds a bridge to understanding. Together, we can cross it." Through intimate emotional moments, evolving character relationships, and vivid urban settings, this chapter deepened the narrative's themes of resilience, hope, and the transformative power of education and empathy, inviting readers to believe in the ripple effect of their own actions. The city was alive with anticipation. A major public event, the National Forum on Digital Literacy and Civic Trust, was only days away, and Sarah had been invited as one of its keynote speakers. The invitation was not just a personal honor, but a symbol of how far the movement had come. What had once been a loose coalition of concerned citizens had become a national force, shaping discourse and influencing policy. Sarah sat in her modest home office surrounded by notes, statistics, and handwritten reminders. But more than facts or figures, she was focused on something deeper: what story would reach people's hearts? What message could pierce through the noise of cynicism, confusion, and fear? She kept returning to a single, burning truth: people needed to believe that change was possible. That stupidity, as defined in the theory, wasn't an immutable trait, but a collective vulnerability, one that could be addressed through compassion, education, and courage. In the days leading up to the forum, she rehearsed her speech out loud in the garden, refining her words until they felt like her own heartbeat. Mia came over to listen and offer gentle feedback. Jake sent voice notes cheering her on, while Marcus helped pull last-minute data that backed up her most urgent points. On the day of the forum, the venue buzzed with energy. Held in a massive civic auditorium, the crowd was a mix of educators, tech leaders, community organizers, students, and policymakers. There was tension in the air, a recognition that this wasn't just another event but a crucial gathering at a pivotal moment. Sarah sat backstage, her heart thudding, her hands calm. She was no longer the unsure, anxious woman she had once been. She had walked through fire and found her voice. When she stepped onto the stage, the spotlight caught her hair, now streaked with silver, and the audience quieted. She began not with data but with a question: what if everything you believed was built on a lie, but the person who told you that lie was someone you loved? The room held its breath. Sarah told the story of the mother who had written to her after the retreat, of the family torn by misinformation, and the journey back to reconciliation. She then moved into the architecture of the theory of stupidity, how it weaponized fear and identity, and how it thrived in echo chambers. She didn't shy away from the pain. She talked about the betrayals, the times she felt helpless, the nights she almost gave up. But she also spoke of beauty, truth circles forming in rural libraries, teenagers educating their families, strangers becoming allies. This isn't about shame, she said, her voice steady and warm. It's about illumination. About reclaiming the right to think, to question, to connect. Stupidity isn't a curse. It's a warning. And we are the answer. Applause erupted before she had even finished. People stood, not just in agreement, but in recognition of their own role in the fight. Her speech was streamed live and went viral within hours, quoted by major outlets and shared across social media. But the most meaningful response came from a handwritten note passed to her by a college student after the event: "You made me believe that my voice matters. I'm starting a truth circle on my campus. Thank you." The days that followed were a blur of interviews, meetings, and new initiatives. The education program she and Jake had proposed received pilot funding in 3 states. Mia's wellness framework for activist communities was being implemented by partner organizations. Marcus had secured a grant to develop an app that taught media literacy in engaging, gamified modules. The movement had grown, but so had its integrity. Sarah worked to ensure that as it scaled, it never lost the human connection that made it powerful. Yet even in the midst of progress, challenges remained. A popular podcast host released a series mocking the stupidity theory as elitist and manipulative. A group of political operatives launched a disinformation campaign trying to paint Sarah as a government puppet. She and her team responded with transparency and patience, refuting false claims, clarifying intentions, and doubling down on local engagement. They had learned that attacks often signaled effectiveness. They were being noticed, and that meant they were making a difference. The emotional peak of the chapter came late one night when Sarah sat alone, watching the viral video of her forum speech. She saw herself speaking with conviction, heard the quiver in her voice when she mentioned her father, and felt an overwhelming wave of emotion. She wasn't just proud, she was in awe. Not of herself, but of the countless people who had believed in her when she didn't believe in herself. Of the communities who had taken the spark she'd lit and turned it into a wildfire of awareness and action. Of the girl she once was, sitting alone with a broken heart and a laptop, determined to understand why people hurt each other with lies. Sarah writing in her journal under the quiet light of a lamp, "We are not here to win arguments. We are here to create understanding. Truth isn't a weapon, it's a bridge. And I will keep building it, brick by brick, voice by voice." Through powerful oratory, deeply personal revelations, and an emotional arc that blended vulnerability with triumph, this chapter captured a pivotal moment in Sarah's transformation, from truth seeker to truth sharer, from solitary advocate to national leader, offering readers the message that no voice is too small to make a difference. The weeks after the forum brought a surge of attention, some of it celebratory, some critical, and all of it relentless. Sarah found herself in a whirlwind of activity, media appearances, advisory board invitations, requests from school districts and nonprofits eager to adopt her methods. She moved through it with focus and grace, but the constant pace left little room for stillness. At night, when the interviews were over and the calls had ended, she would sit quietly with a cup of tea and look out at the city below, trying to remind herself of what mattered most: connection, clarity, and care. One afternoon, while visiting a newly launched Truth Circle in a predominantly immigrant neighborhood, Sarah experienced something that brought her to tears. A young woman named Lila stood up during a group dialogue and shared how her family had almost fallen apart during an election year, torn between clashing online narratives. "But when I started asking different questions," she said, "when I stopped trying to win and started trying to understand, we began talking again. We're not perfect, but we're not strangers anymore." The group clapped softly, and Sarah blinked back emotion. It was one thing to talk about theories and frameworks. It was another to witness their real-world healing power. Inspired by that moment, Sarah and her team launched a new campaign, Ask to Understand. It encouraged people to approach difficult conversations with humility, focusing not on correcting others, but on listening and asking better questions. They partnered with libraries, community centers, and even local grocery stores, any place where neighbors naturally gathered. Posters and pamphlets went up. A short film featuring real stories like Lila's was produced and shared widely online. The campaign caught on quickly. Hashtags trended. News outlets took notice. Celebrities and teachers alike began using the materials. But success brought friction. Internal debates emerged in the movement about scale versus depth. Some felt they were moving too fast and losing their foundation. Others believed this was their moment to expand boldly. Tensions flared during a leadership meeting. Marcus voiced concern that their work might become performative. Jake pushed back, arguing that momentum couldn't be wasted. Mia, ever the bridge, urged everyone to take a breath. Sarah listened, weighing each perspective carefully. That night, she stayed up late drafting a vision document, not a plan, not a mandate, but a recentering of values: presence, humility, trust, and community first. The next morning, she read it aloud to the team. Silence followed. Then nods. Then commitment. They remembered who they were. Amid the growing visibility, Sarah was invited to participate in a private roundtable with several major tech company executives. The atmosphere was formal, guarded, and high stakes. Algorithms, content moderation, and freedom of speech were debated. Sarah spoke plainly: the question isn't whether your platforms allow free speech. The question is whether they enable understanding. And if your systems profit more from outrage than from empathy, then they are part of the problem. The room was quiet. One executive looked away. Another scribbled notes. Afterward, two approached her privately and expressed genuine interest in collaborating on education-based solutions. It wasn't a breakthrough, but it was a crack in the wall. The emotional peak of the chapter arrived when Sarah visited her father's grave for the first time in over a year. It had taken her this long to feel ready. She sat on the grass beside the headstone, speaking aloud through tears. "I wish you could see what we've built. I wish we could have had just one more honest conversation. I know now that you weren't the enemy. You were scared. You were confused. And you thought you were protecting something. I finally understand that." The breeze rustled the leaves around her. She felt a release, not of grief, but of anger. And in its place, peace. Returning home, Sarah received a letter in the mail from a retired teacher in Ohio who had used the movement's curriculum in her last year before retiring. The teacher wrote, "In all my decades in the classroom, I never saw anything engage students like this. You're not just giving them information. You're giving them tools to live better lives. Thank you." Sarah held the letter to her chest. It wasn't validation she needed, it was affirmation. That even in quiet corners of the country, the seeds of understanding were taking root. Sarah walking through the city at dusk, passing by murals and cafes, overhearing bits of conversation, laughter, music. Life, in all its messy beauty, was carrying on. As she turned the corner to her apartment, she noticed a small sticker on a lamppost, "Truth is brave." She smiled and whispered, "Yes, it is." Through moments of public challenge, internal tension, and personal reconciliation, this chapter deepened the story's emotional resonance, reminding readers that truth, at its best, is not just something we say, but something we live, imperfectly and courageously, every day. Fall settled into the city with a quiet kind of beauty, golden leaves drifting down, the air crisp with a sense of transition. For Sarah, the changing season mirrored the transformation unfolding within the movement. What had begun as a firestorm of reaction and resistance was now maturing into a rooted, long-term cultural effort. The "Ask to Understand" campaign had been their most widely embraced project yet, reaching across age, class, and political divides. Requests for workshops poured in from school boards, union halls, and even law enforcement agencies looking to rebuild fractured community relationships. The movement had momentum, but Sarah knew the real challenge was sustaining it without burning out its people, or its purpose. She found herself waking earlier each morning, drawn to the quiet before the noise of the day. Her apartment, once just a place to sleep between battles, had become a sanctuary. She spent more time cooking, tending to the balcony garden, writing longhand journal entries in the gray light before dawn. These rituals grounded her as her public responsibilities grew. On one such morning, she read a letter from a high school senior named Tori, who had started a truth circle at her school after hearing Sarah's forum speech. "We meet every Wednesday," Tori wrote. "We talk about things we've never said out loud before. I feel like I'm becoming someone I actually like." Sarah wept reading that line. It wasn't about scale. It was about significance. At a regional conference a week later, Sarah delivered a talk focused on the concept of psychological immunity, the idea that just as our bodies can develop defenses against illness, our minds and hearts can grow more resistant to manipulation and fear through shared dialogue, emotional literacy, and critical thinking. The concept caught on. By the end of the week, a university psychology department reached out, wanting to co-develop a curriculum around it. Sarah agreed, knowing this blend of science, emotion, and storytelling could be a powerful foundation for future work. But not all developments were easy. A former ally, someone who had helped establish the first truth circles, had gone public with criticism, accusing the movement of becoming too corporate, too soft, too afraid to name the real enemies. The word stung. They weren't entirely untrue. Compromise had been necessary at times to gain access, funding, reach. Sarah debated internally, had they lost their edge? Were they bending too far to appeal to the center? After several sleepless nights, she reached out to the critic directly. The conversation was tense but ultimately human. "I miss when it felt like a fight," the woman admitted. Sarah replied gently, "It still is. It's just a different kind of fight now, one that lasts longer, cuts deeper, and saves more people." To anchor the team during this emotional storm, Sarah organized a recentering day, no meetings, no metrics, just connection. They gathered in the garden where it all started, shared meals, read aloud from their favorite books, and reminded each other why they had joined the movement in the first place. Jake spoke about how it saved his life. Mia cried as she talked about the power of creating space for others to heal. Marcus admitted he was still struggling with cynicism but believed in the people more than ever. It was a needed reset, a collective exhale. Meanwhile, Sarah continued to mentor younger voices in the movement. She met with Tori, the high school senior, during a campus visit. They walked under rows of changing trees, talking about fear, leadership, and what it means to be brave without being loud. Sarah saw so much of her younger self in Tori, but with more tools, more support, and a network Sarah never had. That, she realized, was the true legacy, not just the work she had done, but the world she had helped make possible for others to step into more freely. The emotional climax of the chapter came during a panel discussion at a national town hall televised across the country. Sarah was joined by an Army veteran, a high school student, a tech ethicist, and a mother whose son had been radicalized online but eventually found his way back through a local truth circle. Each shared their journey toward clarity, reconciliation, and rebuilding trust. Sarah sat listening, her heart swelling. When it was her turn to speak, she said only, "If you ever wonder whether people can change, if you ever think this is hopeless, remember these stories. They're not theories. They're lives." The audience rose to their feet. Later that night, back in her apartment, Sarah stood on the balcony looking at the skyline, shimmering under the amber glow of the streetlights. The city no longer looked like a battlefield to her. It looked like a classroom, a canvas, a field waiting to be seeded again and again. She thought of her father, of her friends, of the people she would never meet whose lives had been touched by a story, a workshop, a question well asked. The chapter closed with her writing an email to Tori. The subject line read, "You're ready." The message was simple: "I hope you'll consider mentoring next year's students. You have something the world needs." Through evolving relationships, ideological tension, inner doubt, and deep affirmation, this chapter underscored that leadership isn't about being the loudest voice in the room, it's about helping others find their voice, and making sure they're heard. The air was cold and sharp the morning Sarah stood at the train station, waiting for the 6:40 a.m. express that would carry her to the capital. She wore a long gray coat and kept her gloved hands in her pockets, mind racing despite the calm exterior. She'd been summoned, there was no other word for it, to participate in a closed-door policy summit involving top lawmakers, educators, and tech executives. It was an unprecedented step, formal recognition that misinformation wasn't just an inconvenience, but a national crisis. And they were finally asking the people who had been on the front lines of the fight what to do about it. As the train sped through farmland and industrial ruins, Sarah thought about how strange it all felt. Just a few years ago, she had been on her knees in her kitchen, grieving her father and the country she thought she knew. Now, people in power were looking to her for answers. But she didn't feel like she had answers. Not clean ones, anyway. What she had were stories. Real ones. Painful ones. And maybe, just maybe, those were enough. The summit was held inside a government complex where security guards checked every badge and hallway conversations were peppered with acronyms. Sarah was one of only a handful of civilians present without institutional affiliations. Her seat at the table felt both earned and out of place. She listened carefully as senators spoke about content liability and digital sovereignty. Tech executives offered charts and reassurances. But when the moderator turned to her, everything quieted. She began not with policy, but with people. She told the story of a mother whose son had fallen down a conspiracy rabbit hole, and how, over the course of months, the movement helped him emerge, scared, disoriented, but alive. She spoke of teachers, students, and elders sitting in circles, asking questions they never dared ask before. And then she said something that made the whole room lean in: you can't legislate clarity. You can't automate compassion. But you can build trust, if you're willing to go slow enough to be human again. Silence. Then, one of the younger senators, a former educator, asked, "What would it look like if we took that seriously?" It was the start of a real conversation. Over the course of the day, Sarah found herself moving from speaker to speaker, threading stories into policy ideas, funding for local dialogue spaces, media literacy in all public schools, platform transparency that included emotional impact reviews, not just engagement metrics. The conversations weren't always easy. Some resisted. Some just nodded politely. But a few, the right few, listened. Really listened. That evening, as she walked out into the bitter wind, her breath visible in the dark, Sarah felt both exhausted and strangely peaceful. Change, she realized, didn't come in a flood. It came in small drips, words, glances, pauses, second thoughts. She had dropped some of those seeds today. Back home, she found a message from Tori, the student leader she'd been mentoring. It was a shaky video of a new truth circle forming at her college, students huddled in a common room, chairs arranged in a circle, one young man sharing his experience of realizing how much anger he'd been carrying since childhood. "We just sat there," Tori wrote. "No one tried to fix him. We just listened. And it changed something." Sarah replied simply, "That's the work." A week later, she was invited back to the same studio where she'd once nervously recorded her first podcast appearance. This time, the host greeted her like an old friend, and the tone was reverent. They talked about the summit, the movement, and the ongoing push against the theory of stupidity. Sarah brought up a subtle shift she'd been noticing, not in politics, but in people. More calls to listen. More essays about humility. More community groups hosting workshops without prompting. It was like the country was starting to wake up, slowly, but still. The emotional climax of the chapter came in an unexpected phone call. It was from her mother. Their relationship had been strained for years, frayed not just by grief, but by the arguments they'd had over what was true, what was real, and what was forgivable. Her mother's voice was tentative. "I watched your talk," she said. "The one at the summit. I didn't understand everything. But I saw you. I saw how much this matters to you. I think I'm ready to talk. Really talk." Sarah sat down, heart pounding. "I'd like that," she whispered. They didn't solve anything on that call. But they didn't fight either. And that alone felt monumental. The chapter ended with Sarah standing in front of a map pinned to her wall. It was marked with pins, each one representing a truth circle or campaign node. Some were in cities. Others in tiny towns she'd never heard of. She added a new pin, Capitol Hill. Then another beside it, home. Through high-level policy work, intimate personal breakthroughs, and the continued grounding of human stories, this chapter revealed a growing truth, that transformation wasn't about one solution, but many small, sincere actions stacked together. And maybe, just maybe, stupidity could be outgrown, if we learn to meet ignorance not with shame, but with truth, patience, and the radical act of listening. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?